Can you trust the media? It's a common question, and one that's popping up more and more often in our increasingly polarized world. Over the years, we've seen numerous examples of news networks twisting the truth to fit a certain narrative, or spreading outright lies in order to gain public support for military initiatives.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarmingly, some media outlets publish they are true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 This is extremely dangerous.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous.
Renowned academic and social critic Noam Chomsky once said, "He who controls the media controls the minds of the public." In Manufacturing Consent, his work explaining the failure of capitalism and corporate control of the US, he focuses on highlighting the role that the media has played for decades, and continues to play, in manipulating public opinion for the benefit of private interests. In today's climate, it's not hard to find people who denounce the mainstream media as a pile of lies and fabrications, but then run to Fox News or other such networks as a reliable source of information, not realizing that, whomever they listen to, all modern news outlets are controlled by a set of interests that have nothing to do with sharing useful, educational, or trustworthy information. Just 21 companies own all the media outlets in the US, 5 of which own all the major news networks of the country. You might remember from one of my earlier videos that these big 5 are Comcast, Disney, News Corp, National Amusements, and AT&T. This quasi-monopoly allows those who own these companies to feed the nation a twisted version of reality, and make people believe whatever they want us to believe. This creates an environment in which only the news that fits the interest of the individuals who own these private companies makes it to the public. This corporate domination of the media goes hand in hand with the corporate domination of the government, and perpetuates a system where absurdly wealthy individuals run the show without ever needing to be elected. All modern news sources have become a single, unified front aimed at manufacturing consent and steering the conversation away from real news and towards pointless aesthetic disagreements. The news you see today has very little to do with informing you about what is going on around the world in a clear and objective manner. Today's news outlets only focus on 2 things: pandering to the biases of their audience and indirectly promoting the financial agendas of specific industries. For most of its existence, the American media has painted our way of life as the best way of life, whether for its economic opportunity for right-leaning media or standards of democracy and fairness for left-leaning media. We have been fed the lie that America is the #1 country in the world and indoctrinated to believe it. The only thing America can truly claim the #1 spot for is wasting money on the military. And how do we justify that? Just turn on the news. For decades, the US media has created news stories to glorify intervention in foreign countries, often lying outright about certain events. The tiny number of terror attacks on American soil are covered from all angles, but the vast and ongoing devastation wrought in the Middle East by the US military and our murderous sanctions barely get a mention. And the media doesn't only avoid mentioning US interventions, it also avoids those of its friends and allies. In the 1970s, when Indonesia invaded East Timor and occupied neutral territory, killing thousands, the media said nothing. Indonesia was a US ally. Today, the conflict in Yemen has been labeled as one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, and it's been going on for 6 years. Innocent people are dying in atrocious conditions every single day. Have you seen any media coverage of this lately? Has Fox, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, or any of the others said anything about the plight of the Yemeni people lately? No. Why is that? Because the Saudi army is largely responsible for the murders. And who arms the Saudi army? The United States. Once again, corporate interest and the country's bottom line supersede the right to accurate information. No matter which way these outlets lean, they are all guilty of filtering the information we receive to suit the interest of their owners. The name of the game in American media is not to inform, engage, and empower the world, as CNN so eloquently puts it, but to sell, manipulate, and turn a profit for shareholders.
Is it okay for the Dutch news network NOS to show a twisted version of an interview by BBC's John Sweeney asking Putin about the killings in the Ukraine, where the NOS edited the original interview so that Putin seems to walk away, ignoring Sweeney? Yet the original interview, which can also be found on the internet, shows Putin taking his time answering the question. Do you remember the little boy from Syria, sleeping between the graves of his parents? That too was staged and broadcast on purpose as to manipulate the people into yet another war. The boy was paid to lie there. I don't know about you guys, but this is not okay. It's not okay to fake white helmets saving a wounded man right after a bombing, only to have a selfie taken. That's deceit. It's not okay to lie to the public about Syria and the alleged chemical attacks, so that yet another war can be justified. For months we were lied to by the mainstream media. Remember this poor little girl? You probably will, for she was used 3 times for 3 different rescue missions in 3 different months in 2016. I find that shocking. It is not okay to fake attacks on women and children to trigger an emotional response that justifies the invasion of yet another foreign country. I find it horrifying to see the well-designed deceit of Western people who watch and trust the news. The spreading of disinformation is nothing new. Back in the early 1950s, the CIA set up Operation Mockingbird, a large-scale program in the US with the sole purpose of manipulating news media for propaganda purposes. Leading American journalists were recruited into a propaganda network. In other words, the Secret Service determined what was going to be on TV and in the news. German whistleblower Udo Ulfkotte, high-profile journalist for the Frankfurter Allgemeine, stated in front of the camera that he felt deeply ashamed to have consistently lied to the public for over 25 years.
Well, I've been a journalist for about 25 years, and I was educated to lie, to betray, and not to tell the truth to the public. But seeing right now, within the last months, how the German and American media tries to bring war to the people in Europe, to bring war to Russia, this is a point of no return. And I'm going to stand up and say it is not right what I have done in the past. To manipulate people, to make propaganda against Russia, and it is not right what my colleagues do and have done in the past, because they are bribed to betray the people, not only in Germany, all over Europe. The reason writing this book was that I am very fearful of a new war in Europe, and I don't like to have this situation again, because war is never coming from itself. There is always people behind it to push for war. And this is not only politicians, this is journalists too. And I just have written in the book how we have betrayed in the past our readers just to push for war, and because I don't want this anymore. I'm fed up with this propaganda. We live in a banana republic and not in a democratic country where we have press freedom, where we have human rights. If you see the German media, especially my colleagues who day by day write against the Russians, who are in transatlantic organizations and who are supported by the United States to do so, well, people like me, I became an honorary citizen of the state of Oklahoma in the United States. Just why? Just because I write pro-American. I wrote pro-American. I was supported by the Central Intelligence Agency, by the CIA. Why? Because I should be pro-American. I'm fed up with it. I don't want to do it anymore. And so I've just written a book not to earn money. No, it will cause a lot of trouble for me, just to give the people in this country, in Germany, in Europe, and all over the world, just to give them a glimpse of a view what goes up behind the closed doors. Now, you ask, what have I done for intelligence agencies? So please see, most of the journalists you see in foreign countries, they claim to be journalists, and they might be journalists, European or American journalists, but many of them, like me in the past, are so-called non-official cover. That's what the Americans call that. I have been a non-official cover. Non-official cover means what? It means you too work for an intelligence agency. You help them if they want you to help them, but they will never, when you are locked, or when they find out that you are not only a journalist but a spy too, they will never say, oh, this was one of our guys. They will not know you. That means non-official cover. So I have helped them in several situations, and I feel ashamed for that too now. Like I feel ashamed that I have worked for a very recommended newspaper like the Frankfurter Allgemeine, because I was bribed by billionaires, I was bribed by the Americans not to report exactly the truth, but I just imagined in my car while I was driving to this interview, I just tried to work out in my brain what would have happened if I would have written a pro-Russian article in the Frankfurter Allgemeine. Well, I don't know what would have happened, but we were all educated to write pro-European, pro-American, but please, not pro-Russian. So I'm very sorry for that, but this is not what I understand for democracy and for press freedom. I'm very sorry for that. Well, yes, I understand your question very well. Germany is still a kind of a colony of the United States. You see that in many points, like the majority of the Germans don't want to have nukes in our country, but we still have American nukes. So we are still a kind of a colony of the Americans. And being a colony, it is very easy to approach young journalists through what is very important here is transatlantic organizations. I'm sorry in interrupting you. I'll give you one example. Sometimes the intelligence agencies, they come to your office and want you to write an article. I give you an example not from strange other journalists, from me myself. I've just forgotten the year. I just remember that the German Foreign Intelligence, Bundesnachrichtendienst, it is just a sister organization of the Central Intelligence Agency. It was founded by the American Intelligence Agency. So one day, the BND, this German Foreign Intelligence Agency, came to my office at the Frankfurter Allgemeine in Frankfurt. And they wanted me to write an article about Libya and about Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. I had absolutely no secret informations regarding Colonel Muammar Gaddafi and Libya. But they gave me all these secret informations, and they just wanted me to write, to sign the article with my name. I did that, but it was an article that was published in the Frankfurter Allgemeine that originally came from the Bundesnachrichtendienst, from the German Foreign Intelligence Agency. So do you really think that this is journalism, intelligence agencies writing articles? Oh yes, that article, I have reprinted it partly in my book. That article was how Libya and Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, how he secretly tried to build a poison gas factory, I think in Rapta was the name, yeah. And I got all those informations. It was a story that was printed worldwide 2 days later. But I had no information on that. It was the intelligence agency that wanted me to write this article. So, but this is not the way journalism should work, that intelligence agencies, that they decide what is printed and what not.
The illusion of choice. We think, there are so many channels, how could they all be in on it? Well, that's easy. This shows you who owns whom. Do you see it? There are only 4 companies. When you give people the illusion of choice, they believe they are free. Censorship is one of the greatest dangers to a democracy and to freedom of speech. The secret services still decide what the people are supposed to think and believe. If they want to invade yet another country, they will use the mainstream media to make you believe that that particular country needs to be freed of a terrible dictator who kills his own people. The real reason for the invasion will quite likely never be known to the public. It'll probably have to do with oil or the installment of yet another Rothschild bank. But hey, who cares? It was in the news that they freed those poor people from their dictator and that democracy was bestowed upon them. And if it's in the news, it's true. End of story. Well, no, it's not. If the media coverage is controlled by secret services, it seems only logical to me to focus on the things they refuse to cover or ridicule.
Теперь по поводу ПРО. Послушайте, вот здесь все очень взрослые люди и уже опытные. Мы с вами, я сейчас не буду просить, чтобы вы это все, вот так, как я скажу, отражали в своих материалах, влияли на прессу там, или как. Я просто вам, вот знаете, хочу вам лично сказать, напомнить какие-то вещи. На самом деле, в очередной раз пытались нас надуть. Сейчас построили эту систему, сейчас ставят там ракеты. Так? Но вам должно быть известно. Туда закладывают сейчас антиракеты, способные поражать цели на расстоянии 500 километров. Но мы знаем, технологии развиваются. Мы примерно знаем, в каком году примерно американцы получат новую ракету, которая будет уже не 500 километров, а 1000, а потом больше. И с этого момента они начнут угрожать нашему ядерному потенциалу. Мы по годам знаем, что будет происходить. И они знают, что мы знаем. Это вам только вешают лапшу на уши, как у нас говорят. А вы, в свою очередь, вешаете своему населению. И люди не чувствуют опасности. Вот меня что беспокоит. Ну как мы не можем понять? Мы тащим мир вообще в совершенно новое измерение. Вот в чем проблема. Делают вид, что как будто ничего не происходит. Но я не знаю даже, как достучаться. Но я знаю точно, что мы вынуждены будем отвечать. Только я уже заранее знаю, чтобы нас будут обвинять в агрессивном поведении, хотя это только ответ. Но ясно, что мы должны будем обеспечить безопасность. Не только свою. Нам очень важно обеспечить стратегический баланс в мире. И еще раз вернусь к этому и закончу ответ на этот вопрос с того, с чего начал. Вот именно этот стратегический баланс обеспечил, гарантировал мир на планете, гарантировал нас от крупных вооруженных конфликтов за последние 70 лет. И это благо. Как его можно разрушить, так я не знаю. Мне кажется, что это очень опасно. Не только кажется, я в этом уверен.
Let's see what they're saying now. This article is by Caitlin Johnston. Kremlin-backed media outlets have been banned throughout the European Union, both on television and on apps and online platforms. However, I will say that don't you think I'll just decide for myself what propaganda is. Of course, Russia Today, a state-funded Russian TV station, is gonna, I imagine, support opinions that are convenient for Russian agenda. But I suppose another thing you might say is Russia Today might have a different perspective from Western media, which I'm sure are completely free from propagandist agenda and the way that they're sponsored and the way that they're funded and the people that sit on their boards. Yeah, none of that could lead to particular perspectives being highlighted, could it? The federal government is putting pressure on social media platforms to block Russian media. Twitter, historically the last of the major online platforms to jump on any new internet censorship escalation, is now actively minimising the number of people who see Russian media content, saying that it is reducing the content's visibility and taking steps to significantly reduce the circulation of this content on Twitter. This is why I think it's dangerous to get into this kind of simplistic, sanctimonious, pious certainty, moral certainty. And this is wrong, I feel that we're dealing with a complex and nuanced situation. What's not complicated? It's wrong. that people in Ukraine are suffering. It's wrong that Putin has invaded Ukraine. But when it gets to controlling information, man, I'm not so sure that I like that, because what's being established is a principle now. During Russia's egregious attack on Ukraine, we're going to ban all Russian media because you might get confused, you don't know how to discern information, you're an idiot. That's basically how governments operate, right? Can you imagine a situation down the line where other forms of speech might suddenly be forbidden and censored and annexed? Because I can. Twitter is also placing warning labels on all Russia-backed media and delivering a pop-up message informing you that you are committing wrongthink if you try to share or even like a post linking to such outlets on the platform. Also, if you prohibit conversation, what solution is there going to be then? If you forego diplomacy, communication, the possibility of common ground being found, the not monstering and monsterifying people from other territories, accepting that there are good and bad people everywhere, that the line between good and bad, as the Russian writer Solzhenitsyn said, the line between good and evil runs not between nations or religions and creeds, but through every human heart. By not acknowledging your own fallibility and your own flaws, by simplifying arguments to good and bad, you prevent diplomatic, convivial, collegiate solutions and require that there is an ongoing conflict because there's no bloody intercommunication. For years, US lawmakers have been using threats of profit-destroying consequences to pressure Silicon Valley companies into limiting online speech in a way that aligns with the interests of Washington, effectively creating a system of government censorship by proxy. So it doesn't even have to become legislated. Pressure can be applied and it will be privately undertaken. And what does that mean? No democracy. It would appear that we're seeing a new expansion of this phenomenon today, and the imperial media are pushing for more. Articles and news segments warning of the sinister threat posed by Russian propaganda to misinform and divide Western populations using the internet are being churned out at a rate that's only likely to increase as this latest narrative management campaign gets into full gear. But like other recent events, if this tragedy is used to benefit the interests of the powerful in subtle ways that may not be revoked after the crisis, I'd stay alert if I were you. Not to mention the elitist assumption that you are unable to discern what information is good for you. Have you not seen enough from your leaders in recent years to know that they are not morally superior to you? I come from UK. We had our government partying their way through the whole coronavirus pandemic while people weren't allowed to leave their homes. So that's the reality of what we're dealing with. Not some superior species. Well, we can look at Russia today and we can see that that's wrong. Those idiots, though, they won't understand. They get all carried away and go all Russian by morning. It's the exercise of control. It's de facto elitism. It's de facto aristocracy. You can't decide. You don't know what's good for you, you poor things. Just sit down, watch the television, shut up. We'll do the thinking. Oh, they're eating a stroganoff. This isn't about RT. It's about the agenda to continually expand and normalise the censorship of unauthorised speech. Normalise it. We just accept that that's what you do. You carry a passport. You do as you're told. You don't watch that kind of media. Is that the world you want to live in? Well, if it isn't, stay very, very present because you're being walked into it. Voices calling for diplomacy and de-escalation are being systematically drowned out. Meanwhile, you've got massively influential pundits like Sean Hannity calling for a direct NATO airstrike on a Russian military convoy in Ukraine, without the slightest risk of losing his immense platform for advocating a move that would probably lead to a very fast, very radioactive Third World War. Yeah, if you're going to censor something, censor people advocating for a nuclear war. I think, can we agree that that would be a bad thing? When are you going to stop believing that these things called nations are real and essentially just a mask for the interests of the powerful to distract you? A flag is a veil that prevents you from seeing the truth. How about learning an important lesson that global politics doesn't operate on the level of nations? There are elite interests backed by and veiled by the mask of nationhood. Japanese people, Russian people, German people, Belgian people, people from the Congo, people from Latvia, all human beings, all with more in common with one another than they have in common with the people that govern them, whose interests ultimately dominate geopolitical outcomes. Whoever controls the narrative controls the world. The powerful understand this, while the general public mostly does not. Are you beginning to understand? Are you beginning to?
Almost every nation has invested enormous amount of money in building and stockpiling arms, armaments, bombs, missiles. So all of us as people, were we all thinking all these bombs are being kept for entertainment, for display, or it's artwork? What did you think? One day it will be used. The question is on whom? Wars are almost inevitable because economies are built on war. So we have no intent of stopping the war. Let's be clear about that. When it happens to us, we will cry. When it's happening somewhere else, it's drama. This inhuman attitude towards war and to killing and the suffering that other people go through, we must come out of that. Because most evil things have happened not necessarily because of evil intentions, simply apathy. You sleep through life. That is what is happening to the world, both in terms of soil and in terms of war. We sleep through. After World War II, we formed League of Nations. We made United Nations. The idea was never again such wars will happen, right? Since then, how many wars? Actually, if you look at it, there's not been a single day's break on this planet after World War II without at least a battle going on somewhere. We're not saying we are not in such a la-la land that we don't have any issues. We have issues. But this is the idea of setting up a platform which would solve problems. We pushed it to the side and doing what we want.
So how do we wake up?
First thing is, within your hearts, your anger and hatred must go. I must tell you this.
А вы, в свою очередь, вешаете своему населению. И люди не чувствуют опасности. Вот меня что беспокоит. Ну как мы не можем понять? Мы тащим мир вообще в совершенно новое измерение. Вот в чем проблема. Делают вид, что как будто ничего не происходит. Но я не знаю даже, как достучаться.
And I say this, our country's in trouble. Something has to happen. And if it doesn't happen, and if we don't have smart leadership, you're going to end up with no world. The world is going to be blown to pieces. We have stupid people now running our country. The world is going to be blown to pieces.
What are you thinking about? If the nuclear bomb were to explode right now, what would you choose? Live or die? Live? Yeah, because if I died, then there would be a lot of things I couldn't do anymore. I'd never see my family again. I'd miss the sun on my face. I'd never eat my favourite food again. Never travel. Never be in love. I wouldn't live. What about you? What would you choose? Live or die?
Die. Because if I survive, I wouldn't be able to do a lot of things anymore. I'd never see my family again. I'd miss the sun on my face. I'd never taste my favourite food again. Never travel. Never be in love. I wouldn't live.
The United Nations was founded so that we would never forget the crimes of great power. Are we now in danger of forgetting? Do we forget the lies that justified the conquest of Iraq and disguised America's plans to dominate all the world? And do we accept a distortion of intellect and morality that empties noble words like democracy and liberation of their true meaning, that says it's wrong for a terrorist to kill innocent people, but right for governments to commit the same crimes in our name? The answer is that we need not accept any of this if we recognize that there are now two superpowers. One is the regime in Washington, the other is public opinion, now stirring all over the world, perhaps as never before. Make no mistake, it's an epic struggle. The alternative is not just the conquest of faraway countries, it's the conquest of us, of our minds, our humanity, and our self-respect. If we remain silent, victory over us is assured.
Don't buy into the shadow's dream. Wake up, recreate yourself anew. You are the one you have been waiting for.
Are you ready to win?